Today, creative platform is the theme that we'd like to deal with. For the future of Asian cities, what will be the influence of creative platforms? So we would like to deal with this question with the three speakers here. For a creative platform, there are three things that I thought was common to the three speakers, and that's why we had them invited here. First is how to make a creative platform. It's not going to be a top-down approach. All three of the speakers have said that the thoughts of the individual is reflected in behavior, has appeal, creates a community, becomes a platform, becomes a group, and exerts major influence. The three speakers have done this. So in the course of these discussions, we'd like to talk about that aspect. The first theme, what are our cities aiming for now? What should they be aiming for? Tachikawa-san touched upon this, but as mentioned, it seems that Japanese cities needs to consider what they are aiming to become. In that regard, for Thai and Singapore, I would like to ask what the situation is there. So, Jackman, what do you think?
Singapore, from the Singapore perspective, the Singapore situation is quite interesting. As you know, Singapore is just 50 years old since independence. And there's a saying in Singapore that Singapore went global before we were local. We went international before we got national. So we were in a rush to become an international city, and we didn't really have our own identity. So now that we've passed the 50-year mark, this is a point where it's a coming of age for Singapore. So a lot of the creators are now looking and exploring the identity, the cultural identity of Singapore through their works. And it's also a sign of some kind of maturity in Singapore.
Yes, indeed. Singapore has only been independent for 50 years. And during that time, perhaps an identity had not yet been established so far. Is that the case?
And also because the so-called official narrative for Singapore has always been a more top-down approach where the government leads. Whereas now, after 50 years, the communities and the creators are starting to have their influence in the cultural landscape of Singapore as well.
So there, people like you, Jackson, have appeared and have transcended national borders. And there's a project such as Creative City that has been generated. But why is it that you, Jackson, came up with the Creative City idea to connect 10 cities in Asia?
I was approached by the Taiwanese government from the Kaohsiung city. And Kaohsiung city is very much like Singapore as well. It's a port city, very much like Yokohama as well. And now, in this day and age, the cities are looking to position themselves differently from the rest, to look at how they can also connect with the rest of the cities around the world. So from my experience as a Singaporean, the Taiwanese government found it very relevant to them. Of course, I'm also I'm Chinese a Singaporean of Chinese descent. So I could speak Chinese as well as English. And they found that was a unique identity that they thought that I could help them to connect to the rest of the Asian cities as well.
I see, thank you. Next, Jirat-san, what about the case of Thai? What is Thailand striving to do?
คนไทยชอบความสบายนะครับไม่ชอบให้ใครบังคับชอบ flow life นะครับผ ผมว่าสิ่งต่างๆที่เกิดขึ้นในเมืองไทยณตอนนี้
We don't want to be forced into doing anything. What is happening in Thailand is that I believe that we are headed in the right direction, but in regard to the creative aspects, it is possible to express ourselves freely, and groups can immediately stand up and act. I create a magazine, and I am in a position to support creative activities through my magazine, and I try to support the people around me. If it's something that a single person or a small group cannot do, then I try to help out so that a group can be formed and can be supported. And if they have the power to do so, I believe that they can move forward in the right direction, and that's clear. And I believe that that will exert a very good influence on the country. And that is clearly evident in the culture of the youth in Thailand. So by fostering the culture in Thailand, what is going to be the impact on the cities?
จริงๆแล้วผมมองว่าสิ่งที่เราพยายามทำกันเนี่ยมันตั้งอยู่ในแง่
I believe that right now what we are doing is based on a proper sense of morals, and it is done so that we avoid destroying society, and we can learn from new experiences, and I believe that we can provide good influence to people around us so that the people around us will be motivated to do something new. And I believe that that power is moving in the right direction. It's a bit political. There was some political instability for a while, but the creators are working based on their morals, from their sense of morality. And in the case of businesses as well, they're trying to give back to society as well. And the Thai media should support such activities. What do you think about that? There was mention about the sense of morals. Well, I thought quite strange about that. What do you think about that aspect, though, Tachikawa-san? Well, the two speakers here are very young. They are representative creators of their countries. And in terms of sensibilities, I think that this transcends borders. Now, I'm close to Jackson, and I've been involved in the Creative Cities project. And I think that that's really cool, and I wanted to keep up with them. We're of the same generation, so we transcend national borders, and we're able to do this because of the internet. So in regard to what looks cool and the sense of morals, that has relevancy to Japanese people. It's something that's organically cool. But we are of the same generation, and this is going to be a major trend from here onwards. But that trend needs to be installed in the cities, this sense of use. I'm envious, though, of what I see, and there are points that I'm envious about. We are a mature society, so we have to hack around to see where we can find things that we can change very quickly. Well, hacking may not be the right word for this, but it's different how we behave. But it may well be that because of the speed of their fluidity, perhaps they can show us possibilities quicker than Tokyo. Because Tokyo is more mature, then it may be that Tokyo should show the example, but maybe that's not the case.
So that way, maybe we can see the change in the future. I think we should look forward to that. I think, yes, this sense of moral, as Tachikawa-san has done, that olive that you put together, that is, in a way, that you talked about, it is really to make use of the collective sense of morals of people was the source of what you have done after that disaster, right? Yes. During the past 30 years, we do have sort of the curse of 30 years. During the past 30 years, high economic growth and things were so put into specialized silos, and then pursuing the profitability is the victory of capitalism, and others are not not that good enough, meaning that the economy, in Japanese it is keizai, so that is really in the beginning, the Japanese word for economy was really to save people, to make use of whatever is there. But after 30 years, it has changed itself. But because of that, we are in a generation, we are getting so tired of that kind of trend. Therefore, the creative people, maybe my choice of word is not good, but we want to counterpunch that kind of way of thinking. Isn't there something better? The better circle should be created. That kind of things is something that we are moving forward. The olive is one of them. That kind of project is, I hope it will be looked at as cool. I think there's the foundation in the world that would accept that kind of movement as cool. I think we should make use of it. After listening to that, Jackson, listening to Tachikawa, what do you think about the Japan creativity and the sense of moral? What do you think about the Japanese situation in relation to morality?
ที่จะทำเป็นหน้าที่ของทุกคนอยู่แล้วนะครับทั่วโลกนะครับทุกๆเมืองคนที่มีโอกาสในการสร้างอะไรขึ้นมาเนี่ยอย่างไร
Sense of morality should be held by anybody in the world. And the person of creativity should have that kind of things, because we do receive a lot of things from society. We have to pay it back. We have to give it back. That is something that is very important for anybody's say, sense of morality. Once again, when you think of Japan as city, what should we aim for? Tachikawa-san, what do you think? What should Japan aim for as a Japanese city? One thing is that how to create community, how to create empathy is actually being questioned. Those two colleagues of ours from Asia are very good at it. But for example, using internet, it's the same thing. On the internet, people are saying what they think. They are not really making any dialogue. Person A and person B are saying whatever they want. And there's actually no dialogue these days. But you have to go beyond your position and try to understand. Maybe I do sound too moralistic, but it is necessary to create innovation, to come up with an innovation. For example, engineers, marketers, and designers have to talk to each other to make an innovative city. The city people who are making cities from the hospital, from the real estate agent, from school, they have to talk to each other to transcend their individual situation and come up with the vision. Those real estate people only think about profit after making a development. But those who do have sensitiveness or sensibility, they are already aware of that. Otherwise, there won't be any advancement. Those areas which were not linked in the past, what are in between? If they are linked together, and something will come up. If something will come out, that is design. So we want to call it a design, something which is created through that linkage. Whatever the designer's role it is, I want to see the feeling of commonness. I want to create the linkage in between. I think that is what should be done, especially here in Tokyo. That kind of fluidity has gone down so much in comparison to Thailand, in comparison to Singapore. We are so low in fluidity, but so we have to make it so it is cross-genre or crossover. And the Shinpei has said that the innovation is actually the new connection. new connection or new linkage should be there. So people would talk about that real estate, aging people's housing or school or something. Those things are different things, but they can be randomly connected and can come up with something. So if we come up with something really good, then we'll see something. So the different genres can be connected and increase the fluidity. And in order to make it, the design should be worked as a power. Well, unless it is a form is made, people won't understand. Therefore, in order to make it into a form, design has its own role to play. So when you talk fast, and then you seeing is believing is actually. So you have to show for other people to see. So, for example,
そうでしょうね。おそらく。で、
the fluidity is very important. So making making use of design to make it easier for people to see, that is fluidity. Jackson, what you heard from Tachikawa-san, what's happening here in Tokyo, what's happening in Japan, from the point of view of fluidity, what do you think about the Japanese situation?
Interesting because to Singaporean creators, Japan and of course Tokyo as a city has always been so-called a leading cultural leader for us. So we have always learned a lot from Japan and from Tokyo, how you have created and exported your culture around the world. But it's also interesting to observe how, because you're getting more and more mature, different groups of people will start to move in different directions, whether it's the government or whether it's the creators or whether it's the community at large. I think one of the challenges that Singapore is also facing now is how do we connect these people together, these groups together, so that they share a common ground and a common vision, how they can move together as one. I think that is an interesting challenge, especially because Tokyo is really much bigger as well, much bigger city as well, with a lot of very diverse interests and influences as well.
なるほど。
I see. That's very interesting. In regard to the second theme, I'd like to move on since we're approaching this subject. The second theme is the following. Once we know what directions to pursue for creative platforms, what is the sustained role and function that they can play? So I think the point is a sustained role. As I said at the beginning, for a creative platform, the platforms that the three of you have made had been made on impulse and had momentum because it was the thinking by an individual that created this. But what is the role that these can play? And how can they be sustained so that they will not just end after it has gone through a cycle? So, then can we ask Jirat-san? Yes, indeed. When it comes to city development or the development of creative aspects, for me and for Thailand, to the extent that I have been able to observe, we have to look at the basis of the lives of the people in those cities, and then we have to look at whether they like the city and if their life story will continue and grow in that city. If it is completely away from where that person is, then that will not continue. So you need to approach a person, look at what they need and what they like and what they are striving to achieve. There is meaning in life, and wonderful elements are incorporated. People want to be relaxed. They hate to be forced into doing anything. They like what they like, so it's necessary to extract what people like and incorporate that in creative aspects. Then things that are available in one's life can be fostered to go in a good direction. That kind of flow must always be checked. It's necessary to look at how people are changing and how Thai lifestyles are changing. It's not just in Bangkok. The lifestyles of the Northeast and the Southwest are completely different from each other, but we have to create creative models. And then I think that things will work out well. It's necessary to incorporate the aspects of that person's life to make it sustainable. When you're looking at this and you have insight, and it seems that you're highly capable of drawing that out. Well, Jirat-san has mentioned a very important thing. A community is not intentionally made. There is tacit knowledge that is intangible, and it's necessary to look at what kind of common desires or common directions or common ethos that's necessary before you create a community. In the case of Olive, everybody was anxious to help people, but they didn't gather just because they wanted to get together. It just happened to be the timing, and I appreciate it greatly. But in a sense, there's a certain potential that we have to head in a certain direction. It may be positive or negative thing, but people have a sense of empathy, and that's what led to perhaps the Tokyo Bosai movement. And there was the aspect of Cheese Magazine in Thailand that may have created such empathy. And the trend means flow in English, but to look at that flow and to tie that with creative aspects. And that flow is not always a fixed thing. And in a fixed business, you cannot capture that flow. You have to be able to sense what is coming. And it's important to consider what kind of community is necessary for that. And I thought that that insight was tremendous. It may be a sense of empathy. To sum it up, it may be a matter of empathy. Yes. And Jirat-san has focused upon that point. And I understand what his point is. Well, Jackson, what are your feelings about that?
Empathy is very important, of course. I also feel that relevance and purpose is very important for a platform as well. You need to have that common purpose for everybody, that they share this common purpose and they believe in it. Of course, it's also to connect the people. We see these platforms as like bridges. So you bridge different people with diverse ideas and interests, and how they can share this common ground. So I think to sustain it is really to sustain the relevance and the purpose of the platforms.
So there's the sense of empathy and the sense of purpose. Are you aware of that, Jirat-san? Yes, indeed. I'm in complete agreement with the two colleagues here. Power arises from looking in the same direction. It may be the same thing. There's a lot of power if you're facing the same direction. And the attitudes of the people in that society are very important. The attitudes or the perspective of the people in the society are very important. And unless they are the same, everything becomes fragmented and will disappear. So when you think about the group of individuals, then Tachikawa-san, leadership means a capability to read what is there. Well, I was listening with interest to what is being said. Creators are people who make new things. We make new things. The four of us make new things. The fact that it's new means that it's something that had not existed before, or maybe a destruction of what had existed in the past. In a sense, it's new and yet disruptive, and yet we need to create empathy. So we all have to go in the direction of disruption in order to generate innovation. But there's a very subtle balance that's necessary. It could be very positive or negative. There's a tightrope that we have to walk. I keenly feel that. For example, Tokyo Bosai was very much welcome. But for the Cool Japan proposal, there was a lot of criticism. So what draws empathy and what does not? And what is essential and what is not? Oh, you need a good sensibility to be able to capture that. So perhaps leadership is not the appropriate word. And what I wanted to ask the three of you is that right now I'm administrating a creative platform, but in terms of leadership, to create and manage a platform, what does that mean? It probably does not mean exerting leadership, but then at the same time, does it mean facilitation? What does it mean? I have not been able to clearly define that. So in regard to managing a creative platform as a leader, what is the role that must be played? May I ask that question? Jackson, would you care to reply?
I mean, in terms of leadership, in terms of the, let's say, the Creative Cities project as an example, it was very much about originating the concept, finding a purpose and the relevance for this project. But after that, actually, the role of the so-called leading the project is actually quite different from the usual way. The usual way of curating last time is, if I were to curate, I have to know all the 300 creators that I work with. But now this role has and responsibility has been distributed, you know, for example, and that's made possible because of the, let's say, the internet. So that makes it so much easier to interact and to get responses. And I think that at this day and age, you know, in the age of crowdsourcing and social media, more of this kind of leadership or even like influencer is a very different way of leading. You might lead from a much more subtle or reserved position than the usual way.
確かに非常に微妙ですよね。微妙なさっきさじ加減と立川さん。
It's very say subtle balance, as Mr. Tachikawa has said. Yes, very subtle, isn't it? The ownership, how to let the community hold the ownership, because one person wants to do something, that person is doing something, that's autonomy. I mean, it has to actually overlap with the individual, say, willingness to do as the community's willingness to do something. And then also the language. It's, I mean, not just a leader is leading by him or herself, meaning that you have to receive the people's feeling, people's will first, and then lead. You just cannot be just leading based upon your own idea. Even though you do share the common idea, you really have to share it first and then move forward. The right concept doesn't mean a successful concept, a successful project, but the correct process makes it successful. Therefore, it is important. The process is that when you talk about the community, the platform, for what portion? Well, the goal is not set. I think goal will come up. Of course, there's a hypothesis to begin with when you start the project, but there are people who come here, the early adopters. Among those early adopters, they share some feeling. So they talk about it, and then they exchange their ideas. Not the leaders, if leader just gives the concept and then want the followers to follow, that doesn't work. There's something vague, ambiguous thing actually getting together, and then that should be there as a starting point, and then you move forward. So it is really listening. It's not the top-down. You have to listen first. But you talked about, Jackson has talked about the objective or goal is very important. Among that, the vagueness, you would find a clear objective. And then you agree to work toward that. And then the design is connected. You talked about the modernism. 100 years ago, there's the modernism movement. That was the time that the things were not that abundant, and then the industrial revolution made it possible to have a lot of things, and then the design came in to make the communication easier or make the rational way of manufacturing things. Those were the things, those were the ways of things that the time has accepted. 100 years ago, there were not too many designers, but the architects were there, and then they created that kind of movement. So you talked about the ambiguous, vague hypothesis to be thrown upon to the community. There's a balance that is needed, a very fine balance that you have to make use of so that people can move forward. Jirata-san, when you create, I do share with you, it is terribly difficult to find good leaders because anybody can be a leader. That can happen to you, anybody, but when you say you have to actually support and encourage other people to become leaders, my role is to actually inspire young generation and support the creativity. Those new generation people do have wonderful things. We don't know what will happen in the country, but the young people can make use of their own talent, and we have to encourage and support them. And after that, if things are good, maybe you can just do the shopping and you can enjoy the idea. Anybody can have a great thing in him or her, and we have to draw that out and make things happen, and that will expand and permeate into the society, and there are a lot of followers in society, and if somebody does something that you want to follow, and then that will create the power, and that will actually expand and extend into the society, and that will really create things. And to support and then encourage, that is very good. You really have to have a big, encouragement and support people. But what is the knack of supporting other people? Of course, there's something that is really important. When you do something, your way of doing, you do have your way of doing. For example, I've been involved in fashion or lifestyle. I work with new people. But the young people come to me. And what I am doing, that's what they want to do. Those young people come. There are a lot of groups in Thailand like that. And those people, I help them. I give some instructions. And what kind of power they have, what level of power they have, and who they should visit. We make a decision who should visit. In my case, fashion or lifestyle-related work that I am doing, that is very much of interest for young people. And then among those young people, we find leaders, and then that will organically expand, and we develop together. For example, you do support one event, and then using my media to help them advertise that event. And we meet that kind of people, and we do provide that kind of helping to those people. Anybody can be a leader, and then those leaders should be nurtured, and then those leaders can be influencers and can influence other people in a positive manner. That's a wonderful thing that I've heard, to support people. Well, right now, the mature society can be a society which does not support and help others. And then, why don't you just help others? But these days in mature society, you don't want to support or help others. But now we should look differently and work together. If you think somewhat in a similar way, I hope that those way of working can happen in different industries. The society will be brighter. Jackson, what do you think that process? what kind of, say, process that you are keeping in mind in putting together a process, in implementing process?
A platform?
プラットフォーム
Yeah, I think it's important, like what we've just discussed, is to really share the platform with the younger generation as well. How you share, whether it's information, or whether it's knowledge, or whether it's a network. Yeah. So I think these are important things that we can share through the platform.
なるほど
プラットフォームとして共有する。
So share it as platform, right? I think we are beginning to see the solution and answer to what we have started to ask, to share as the platform, and that is a support I think Jackson is believing. So I think we are looking at our own answer, and the time is almost up. So as a closing comment, we listen to each other today. What is the thing that you have most impressed that you can make use of as a platform? Jackson, will you start with you?
I think it's always very interesting to share the different platforms that we've created and to really see the similarities and the differences between these platforms. But I think what really drives the platform is always the passion of the people behind it.
ジラッツさん
ครับผมคิดว่าจริงๆหลังจากที่ได้ฟังผมจริงๆอยาก
As I listen to you, I want Thai people to listen to you. This time I heard many people's opinions. It was very much inspiring and experience. Well, by looking at a lot of things, we can be inspired, we can create relations, Singaporeans and the Tokyoites. I like to exchange a lot of things. People in Bangkok, a lot of things are happening in Bangkok. And by looking at them, I think that there can be a passion being created and stirred. Thank you.
Tachikawa-san? Well, I think that Jirat-san's words about support was very encouraging. I like it. There's a tendency to be competitive with each self, but it's good to reflect on who you can support. That's a good thing, I thought. And that kind of project is successful. And from my experience, if you're supporting something in a project, then it tends to be successful. It's very obvious. And yet, I think that's truly the perspective of a person creating a magazine. Now, if you create something new, it's part of competition. But in that competition, you could be creating together something. And that's the direction that we should be heading towards. And I think that that is a mission on my part to do so. So if I always look back at who I'm supporting, then it's possible to do this. How should I say it? It's such an obvious thing to say, and yet, well, I was convinced of it. And it was quite stimulating. And so if you bring yourself to that perspective, then you will be able to see clearly who you should be supporting and who you should support. And Jackson mentioned about sharing. Sharing is a way of supporting people. So if you just close it off as your property, then you cannot support someone. So that's why you have to be open, and that's why the aspect of sharing is important. And I was once again convinced about that. Unfortunately, time has come. So finally, we'd like to go through a Q&A session. If there's something that you would like to ask any of the three speakers, please raise your hand, and we'd like to take up your questions. Thank you very much for the very interesting presentations. I'd like to ask Tachikawa-san the following. Personally, I have been looking at your work, And what I thought was good was the design activities where you notice things about the community building, which connects to today's theme, about how to build communities or how do you create designs that make people notice. For example, the Tokyo Bosai. In that book, you're not preaching that we have to learn more about about disasters. And this gets empathy of people for the centers for disaster prevention, and you make people notice, and communities emerge. And in your work, how should I say it? The creative and design capabilities of yourself creates communities. I think that your capabilities are the nucleus. But what are your thoughts about this? Well, thank you. Incidentally, the two persons are not familiar, but Fukuda-san there is one of the top creative directors of Japan. And Fukuda-san probably already knows what the answer is. But indeed, when it comes to the novelty of something and the aspect of empathy, empathy is something that already exists within ourselves, but there are empathy elements that have not yet emerged, which are a good starting point for creative efforts. And I think that the two speakers are doing the same thing, but under those circumstances, my feeling is that there's an ambivalent feeling there. One is that it's quite unexpected. The sense that it's unexpected, that it's new, is necessary. It's a matter of momentum and how much force you can apply. But the other thing is that it's an obvious thing. The reaction that it's very obvious. If you think about it, something is obvious. If you think about it, something is very obvious. You can look at it in two different ways about thinking about it and thinking that it's obvious. As a quality line, both are the biggest common denominator. It may be difficult to see, but it's definitely there. I believe that that's the case. And I will not give up until I can actually see it. That's the feeling. At the beginning, it's something that's unexpected. If you combine unexpected elements, then you need the capability to do that, but also you need to have a wide perspective. And a well-balanced creative director is a very good creative director indeed. In regard to the capabilities of the two speakers here, creative cities is a wonderful idea. It's like creators making tourist guides for each country. That's a great idea. I thought that was clever. That's one idea, and it's easy to do. It's tough, of course, but that's obvious. And I think that each of us had that kind of feeling. It's difficult to express. It may be difficult to express, but Tachikawa-san and the other two speakers are able to indicate new rules. And it doesn't sound like you are preaching to others. It's something that can be accepted in a natural manner. And that attracts people, and that attracts empathy. And I think that that's a very important factor. Well, thank you very much. Thank you. It seems like we've run out of time, but if there's some other person who would like to ask a question. Thank you very much. My name is Tanaka. And I'd like to ask the three speakers the following question. Rather than innovate, I'm more interested in the aspect of being happy. So what's the difference between innovative city and happy city is my question. And Jackson, would you care to reply first?
It's a million-dollar question. How to be happy? Well, I think it's very important. If, let's say we talk about innovative cities. I think we were talking about it. What is the goal to be innovative? And I think that our ultimate goal, for example, for most cities is definitely to make the people who are involved in these platforms to eventually derive happiness from the activities that from the platforms.
Okay. จริงๆแล้วในสิ่งที่ผมทำผมมองว่า
What I am doing is that that's the foundation of my work. It is being happy, making people happy is the foundation of my work. But people may not know how to be happy, so I want everybody to be happy, so I support things which makes people happy. Whatever I do, it's related to that fashion or lifestyle or food culture or whatever it is. That is the basis of people's lives. Therefore, that is making it that happy is really the foundation of everything. Happy city and innovative city. Well, when it comes to happy city, that is, I think, a goal. An objective. And being innovative or not, that is the method or tool to reach that goal. If you go as is, you may not be happy at all. Well, we are, in a way. We are now tied in the family, but you now want to be freed of family connections or community connection. That was the idea to create this the environment right we are in now. The market is created, but we lost family connections, and that we thought that will individuality will make us happy, but we are not happy anymore. So we have to redefine happiness. Right now, we thought in the past, if you have enough food and clothing and lodging, that would make you happy. That's what we thought, but actually it's not. But there's something that is different that makes you happy, so we have to move forward that. And we have to use a different methodology, that is the innovation that we need to reach happy. So, but when you say happy, being happy, what is being happy right now? You really have to think about the question happiness of right now. But right now, when you think about being happy, that is a long-term happiness that we should look forward to. I think that is my individual theme. Thank you very much. Now it's time for us to close this session. Thank you very much for your participation, and a big applause for 3 speakers. Thank you. Thank you.